folks. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. It is, wow, 7:10, folks. We got a lot to unpack today, so let's get into it. Brian Thompson, CEO of the United Healthcare Company, who was tragically murdered. The suspect, Joe Mangiacotti, a 26-year-old suspect, has been charged with the shocking case. Developments, including statements from Thompson's grieving family as they break their silence. Also making waves, Daniel Penny has been acquitted of the homicide charges filed against him after the tragic death of Joe Mangiacotti. Penny's trial may be over, but the larger issue remains. The accountability of the city and state officials. For years, mentally ill individuals like Penny have been left to spiral unchecked, leading to avoidable violence and suffering. Isn't it time those responsible for allowing this crisis to fester face their own reckoning? Meanwhile, Jordan Neely's father has pointed the finger at racism in the broken system. But today we'll ask difficult questions. Where was he when it mattered most? How can society be blamed when personal responsibility is seemingly absent? The loss of Jordan Neely highlights not just systemic failings, but also the personal choice that define our communities. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts, your perspectives, your voices. What is it that matters to you? All right, some housekeeping. You can join the conversation for the remainder of the hour at 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. Our text line is up and running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. It appears on the screen here in the studio. I'm broadcasting through the Cameo studios today. And today it's being back at HQ, flying the board there. He'll get you set up and into the studio for a few-way topic conversation. Again, that number is 508-871-7000. Don't forget you can listen to WCRN 830, streaming 24/7 on the TuneIn app, as is thousands of other radio stations. You can also listen and watch the Joe Mangiacotti Show on my social media platforms, the Joe Mangi Show, MANGI, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch TV, LinkedIn profile. Also, you can go to the WCRN Facebook page or our YouTube channel, and you're streaming there as well. Hosts now have that option, so you can see that going forward. And then this is, of course, on the Joe Mangiacotti Rumble page, and it will also be streamed on the new streaming channel, Twitch TV, which is there, Roku, Fire Stick, Smart TV. All of those things, you can find it there, like you can do anything else. So, Jordan Neely's tragic death has sparked a nationwide debate about systemic failures, societal responsibility, and individual accountability. Recently, Neely's father filed a lawsuit against Daniel Penny, claiming negligence and racism in the events that led to his son's death. But this raises critical questions. It does for me, should it for you. Well, where was the father? Where was Neely's father? They don't have the same last name. Does this indicate absentee fathers? In his family, during the years when Jordan was visibly struggling on the streets, when he really needed help. Jordan Neely's history as a talented performing, allegedly, right? Talented street performer. When they showed those pictures of Neely back when this all broke, during the Michael Jackson moonwalk and performing as Michael Jackson. He was, 8 years old? But he was a talented street performer at one time. Turned homeless, mentally ill individual. And this is all well documented. Diagnosed with schizophrenia and battling substance abuse. Nearly cycled in and out of shelters and hospitals. His erratic behavior and numerous arrests for violent incidences demonstrated a dire need for care and intervention. Yet his father, now stepping forward with legal claims, was notably absent during the Neely's trial. Where were you, Dad? Stepping up for the money now. Jordan Neely's history as a talented performer, returning homelessness as an individual, that happened over many, many years. Where was the family? Where was he when Jordan needed help finding stability and medical care, or even just emotional support? Where was the family network when Neely was a beloved street performer, as we're told? began spiraling into homelessness and despair. The lack of familiar presence and responsibility in Jordan's life is a glaring, and just as glaring as the systemic failures now being criticized. It is easy to blame society and systemic racism or others when tragedy strikes. But true accountability starts at home. If more families stepped in to provide love, guidance, and advocacy, perhaps fewer individuals like Jordan would fall through the cracks. This isn't to absolve the system of its faults, but to highlight the shared burden of care that falls on families, communities, and institutions alike. The lawsuit raises profound questions. Is it fair to lay all the blame at the feet of one man who acted in the heat of the moment, potentially protecting others? Or should the focus also include those who had years to intervene and support family, but chose not to? So let's discuss the balance of responsibility, societal, systemic, and familiar, that shapes these tragedies. What are your thoughts on this? This goes across the board. Decades ago, we started to close mental institutions. But we didn't have, and we closed them because of the conditions and the abuse that were taking place in these institutions. But we didn't have something to replace it, nor did we fix the institutions. We simply closed them. We closed them and we put people out on the street to fend for themselves. Now, a lot of the people that were in these institutions ended up there because there was no family structure. There was no safety net there. There was no touchstone for these people. Some of them were there because of their family, thinking that they were doing the best option available, putting them into that situation. But for this guy now to step up and file a lawsuit, I'm talking about Andy's father. The colonies on this guy. And that's a serious question. Where were you? Where were you when he needed your help? Look, the formative years aren't when he's 17, much less 30. They're when he's 4 and 5. Those are your formative years. Who you are as a person, you are who you are. Your personality is set at 5. In those formative years, those beginning years, it's so important that you have that sense of security and family and belonging. You need the touchstone, you need that foundation. And if he wasn't there, the father wasn't there, it was a chaotic life. And he never had a sense of belonging, much less security. That's setting the tone for this kid's life. And there is something about when you get into the system and you start getting recycled. And let's face it, how many times are people truly helped? Even in the hospital situation, much less the criminal or punitive path. Sometimes they get an education, but the education is how to be a better criminal. That's often the case. We could put to study episode on this. It's something that judges take under consideration when they sentence a juvenile or young person. Am I going to do more harm putting them into jail or prison? Is that just going to harden them? Is that going to expose them to hardcore criminals that will teach them how to be better criminals? Or am I better off with the suspended sentence of probation and requiring a few programs to meet certain criteria? So now that this guy, the father, comes out, what say you on this? 508-871-7000. And now that he's been acquitted of the charges, it's a lot more difficult to win a civil suit. Not that it can't be. Burden of proof, the thresholds to meet, they're not as high or severe in several instances that are criminal. But now that Penny has been acquitted of those charges, found not guilty, it does make it more difficult to civil suit. And what are they going to go after? Now, the other thing is, this Black Lives Matter leader, Hawk Newsom, we've heard his name before. Have you heard this guy? Now calling for black vigilantes to descend into major cities, retaliating against 26-year-old former Marine Daniel Petty's acquittal. Now, after the hearing, or after the case and he got acquitted, one of the networks did track him down, and him and the lawyers went to a local water bar in Manhattan to get a drink. Understandable. Understandable. Minutes earlier, his life was on the line. Depending on how the jury found, he would have been taken into custody and he could have gone away for years. Maybe he could have been let out on bail until sentencing. Who knows? But his life would have changed. Or it went this way, and he's a free man. I probably would have wanted to get out of it. Because you do have this Jamoke, Black Lives Matter, Newsom character, Hawkins, stirring up trouble. But listen, the guy's verbiage he used, it was threatening. And I say, actually, borderline, if not criminal. Calling violence to rise up. But we have to take our first break here on the Tuesday edition of the Tuesday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. Stick with us, folks. We'll be back in 2 and 10. All right, folks. Welcome back to the second segment of the Tuesday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here at 8:30 WCRN. You can join the conversation for the remainder of the hour at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is up and running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. Text that number like you would anyone else. Here's the screen in real time. So, Black Lives Matter, Greta, New York leader Hawk Newsom has made alarming comments calling for black vigilantes to respond to the political in the Jewish case. Newsom has framed the outcome as racial and no evidence of that. No evidence. There was never any racial slurs or issue of race. As a matter of fact, the other gentleman who helped Penny hold down Neely to hold him from causing good damage or carrying out the threats were both under Hispanic and black men. So there's no evidence of that at all. He framed this because of the outcome. No evidence suggests race played. Penny's actions were supported by witnesses, including two men of color who assisted during the incident. Calls for vigilante justice and false claims of racism only serve to inflame tensions and jeopardize public safety. The recent threats of Black Lives or Black vigilante justice from certain Black Lives Matter leaders in response to Penny's mission both dangerous and legally indefensible. These threats, clumped in claims of racism, were just non-existent, undermine the principles of justice and community safety. Daniel Penny, a Marine veteran, acted to restrain Jordan Neely, a mentally ill man behaving aggressively on the New York subway. Penny was assisted in this action by two other passengers, both men of color, highlighting that this was not a racially motivated incident. By twisting this tragic event into a narrative of racism, these leaders are weaponizing the race card for their own political and ideological agendas. It's that simple. This manipulation not only detracts from the real issues at hand, such as mental health care, public safety, but it also risks inflaming racial tensions unnecessarily. It is both irresponsible and reckless to turn this case into a racial flashpoint when the facts do not support such a claim. Threatening vigilante actions is not only morally wrong, but it is also illegal. It sets a dangerous precedent and could lead to real harm. Deepening divides rather than fostering understanding or justice, communities should reject this kind of rhetoric and focus instead on constructive dialogue and solutions. Moreover, the emphasis on race in this case detracts from the broader conversation about societal failures, particularly the neglect of individuals like Julie, who needed intervention long before this tragedy occurred. The focus should be on the systemic changes, not divisive rhetoric. Let's not allow truth to become a casualty in this debate. Race is not a factor here, and we must call out attempts to twist reality for devious, self-serving purposes. Accountability, safety, and unity should remain our shared goals. What are your thoughts on these developments? How neglectful, how dangerous is Hawk Newsom's rhetoric? How dangerous is this? Yeah, my producer says it equates to screaming fire in a crowded theater. And that's okay when there is a fire. But when you do it when there's no fire, that's a problem. People will get hurt. And should he have any liability, should he have any responsibility if his rhetoric, his call for action on a false claim of racism, let's not forget that, if that results in someone being harmed, does he have responsibility there? Can he be held responsible? What say you? 508-871-7000. I just think it's straight up disgusting that he's doing this. And when I was watching the clip of him doing this and saying this, I did notice something. The lack of the LM there. It was an A group. But not not a large group. It was a small, select number of people that he seemed to have brought with him. And to me, that's a little encouraging because it's telling me that, unlike we were a few years ago, mass numbers of people weren't being snookered into this. And let's face it, a lot of people were snookered into the BL movement. And I've drawn this distinction many times before, I'll do it again, is the BLM movement and there's the BLM organization. And the organization is a scam. It borderlines on a Ponzi scheme. It's a protection racket. You had people who were not qualified to run charities being placed in charge of millions of dollars, having no idea what a 503c means, having no idea about the taxes and paperwork that needed to be filed. And when asked about the paperwork, they said, oh, that's triggering. Now that at the end of the year, Webster and other organizations put out the words, we develop new words, or they decide to give a meaning to some slang that came out. And then the most Googled words, and then the word of the year, or things of that nature. I still think that trigger is one of those words I'm sick of, that's overused and not used appropriately. That's triggering. That trigger. We didn't have trigger like that. When I was a kid, trigger was just part of the welcome caps that you had as a kid. You didn't get triggered by something said or the way something looked. Let's say 508 accepted 7,000. So this case, with the father coming out, I think it's disgusting. He's asking for money in this. I think he's an opportunist. I think he's taking a chance here to try to cash in on a tragic death of his son, someone who he clearly wasn't there for. He wasn't there for it. They don't share the last name, so there's a deeper story. I don't know what it is, but I think you could tell. Because where was he? Where was the entire family when Joe was in and out of these institutions when he was fighting addiction? Who was bringing his butt to the detox center? Who was getting him help? It was not all on the system in the government. It's overloaded, but we as a society, we have failed in the sense that a lot of this homelessness that we're dealing with now, that is so prevalent in society today, can be linked directly to the correlation to mental health. And the answer isn't building $800,000 condominiums to house them. Because if the root problems, if the actual issues haven't been addressed, the reason that they are homeless, the issues that they're dealing with aren't addressed, then it's just going to be expensive homelessness. And a lot of people who are homeless are leading that life by choice because the pressures of not being homeless are too much. These are people who cannot or have decided that they don't want to deal with mortgages or rent and cable bills and cell bills and car insurance and taxes. And if they can navigate each day, sleep at night, eat enough food during the day to survive, and maybe their thing is just a drink, or maybe it's hard to drink. And it's an existence. Think about that. Every day they wake up. And if they're homeless, they've got to figure out how to either get food or enough money to buy food, enough money to satisfy whatever that addiction or escapism that they have. Maybe it's a if they're bought you a day. Maybe it's crack, maybe it's heroin, whatever it is. Every day, that's what they do. But that's all they have to do. So how do we fix that? It's much bigger. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. 508-871-7000. I just think the father is, that's just very opportunist. That's all. Very, very opportunist. All right. 508-871-7000. That's how you can get into the conversation. A lot of other things going on around here. I don't like this whole Newsom. The jury found Penny not guilty of criminal negligent homicide. And this just brings up, because I'm going to say this before we get to the break. What the hell was that move? By dropping the bigger charge here of the murder charge and the manslaughter charge, rather. That doesn't normally happen. Was this judge in Alvin Bragg so hell-bent on getting a conviction in this case? They did this, and what does that say? That if you drop that charge and say, well, it doesn't seem like you're going to go our way, so we'll drop this and get you less of this and come back, and that's what they were hoping happened. They were hoping that they came back and found him guilty, so that at least they got a conviction. So I guess the question is this the beginning of the end of Alvin Bragg? We've got the inauguration in a couple of weeks here. We've got a lot of things are going to change. The Alvin Bragg's on the way out. Christopher Ray is, we'll talk about that actually. He's getting ready to resign. We have an article about that. I want to read Tuesday edition of Joe Mangiacotti Show, AM 830 WCRN. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. 508-871-7000. Stick with us. We'll be back on the other side. 2 and 10, folks. All right, folks, welcome back to the second half of the Tuesday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here at AM 830 WCRN. Again, you can always listen by tuning in to AM 830 terrestrial, but also on the TuneIn app. We're streaming in the TuneIn app, thousands of radio stations. You can take us anywhere. It's a great way, a great device, great app to have on your device to take us anywhere. Again, if you download it, punch in WCRN, you'll see our logo. Do me a favor, hit the like button. Take us anywhere. I'm also streaming this on my social media platforms: Facebook, X account, Twitch TV, LinkedIn profile, Joe Mangiacotti Show. We always start the conversation at 508-871-7000. 508-871-7000. Let's go to the phones. Ken is waiting patiently. Hey, Ken, what say you? Go ahead. I didn't hear about Ted. We'll give it one more shot. Ken, what say you? Okay. All right. Well, Ted can work on that. Maybe we're going to reset something there, what maybe the case may be. But again, 508-871-7000. So, as I was saying prior to the break, I mean, just before I get into FBI Director Christopher Wray preparing to resign, the bigger picture is what is going on with Joe Biden in the sense that, as one Democrat put it, it's beyond lame duck. Almost as if he seems to have conceded the presidency. Technically, he's still the president, but it's Donald Trump who seems to be driving policy and being effective, changing things already. Trudeau flying down to Mar-a-Lago, straight over D.C. President of Mexico backpedaling on her rhetoric. Macron inviting him to the Notre Dame. Him and Joe Biden sitting together at the Notre Dame reopening. And for Trump, I don't know if you caught this. So the image of, I know this is radio, so deal with me here. Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Joe is looking at Trump with a look of maybe admiration, certainly civility. And Trump is pulling this for an ad campaign for some fragrance, like your enemies like it, or I don't know. But Donald Trump, he's issued a warning to Hamas. Therefore, Iran, the proxy, that the hostages better be free by inauguration day. Zelensky acknowledging that he may have to concede some real estate and that there be a ceasefire and some kind of resolution to the Ukrainian Russian conflict. Donald Trump is inheriting fire gang. But he's already seems to just him getting elected seems to have straightened some things out, or at least started in that right path. Because if the enemy or not, if you like Trump or not, you have to admit he brings a certain amount of respect and a certain amount of fear to both allies and enemies alike. And we need a little bit of both. You know, they are attacking him on tariffs, right? It's a tax and this and that. Look, the guy was president for 4 years. And he used tariffs in the same way. And he's added the third leg to this use of tariffs. And then that's the negotiation. Because the threat of the tariffs, and here's the thing, the nations that he says I'm going to put a tariff on, it's beyond a threat. Because they believe he will do it. And he will have. He had to. He did it to China. He did it to Russia. He did it to Tehran. He did it to nations. But he's also, in my opinion, using it wisely. And the way tariffs are used wisely is to equal the playing field. He's not going to slap tariffs on products that are not created in the United States that we need to have come in. Obviously, he needs those to come in because we need them for a supply chain. plan showed us one thing. It's the fact of supply chain, or the delicacy of the supply chain, for one thing. But then how grossly we've been negligent in allowing so many vital items not to be made in the United States. This includes medication. A lot of medications not made in the United States. Then you get into steel, and you get into chips, and computers, and important aspects of the infrastructure. All important. But let me get back to my point about Christopher Wray. The Washington Times is covering this, where they say FBI Director Christopher Wray plans to resign on or before Inauguration Day. Wray is calling it quits because he doesn't want to get fired by President-elect Trump. According to sources inside the Bureau, we're familiar with the director's thinking. Now, I think it would be logical that he would think, I want to get out of here. I mean, this is the guy in Congress who tried to tell us that we're not quite sure Trump actually got shot. It might have just been glass from the teleprompter. Remember that? And you got to walk it back right away. So sources are said they're telling the Times he's going to be gone at the inauguration, on or before the inauguration day. Following Mr. Ray's departure, Deputy Director Paul Abbey will become acting director and appoint an acting deputy director. Mr. Abbey's original plan was to stay until May or June so it could help with the transition to a new FBI director. Now, Kash Patel, Mr. Trump's pick to lead the FBI, is meeting Republican senators on Capitol Hill this week. Mr. Patel has served as Defense Secretary, Chief of Staff, and Senior Advisor to the National Security Council, was staffed by Trump to shake up the FBI management. Wray knew his days were numbered at the FBI. Charles Grassley, the Iowa Republican, who will become chair of the Judiciary Committee next month, sent a scathing letter to Mr. Wray saying he should be ousted before his 10-year term as FBI director is up. And he says Mr. Abbey should go too. Grassley's letter changed Mr. Abbey's plans, and he is now looking for an alternative or an alternate acting deputy director to appoint. Grassley wrote in a letter, for the good of the country, it's time for you and your deputy to move on to the next chapter in your lives. I therefore must express my vote of no confidence in your continued leadership of the FBI. Considering the things he did and said as the director, is it a wonder or surprise that he would quit before him? Grassley, who is a leading lawmaker advocating for the protection of whistleblowers, has repeatedly clashed with the FBI over whistleblower reports of abuse of power and other misconduct in the Bureau. Let's see how Wray has been overseeing a real show at the FBI. And whistleblower laws are supposed to be protected. Whistleblowers, that's the whole idea behind it. The allegations included potentially biased investigations of the bizarre chain of events in which the FBI appeared to try to discredit Mr. Grassley and GOP Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin as two senators who probed the Biden family. The raid on Mr. Trump's home, and that was beyond. And that was to go in Mar-a-Lago the way they did, with the force that they showed for a former president's home, with lots of open orders. We found out after the fact they were pre-authorized to use deadly force going into a president's home. Think about that. That's under Joe Biden. And the allegations included politically biased investigations of bizarre chain of events, which the FBI appeared to try to discredit Grassley and GOP Senator Ron Johnson. In the raid on Mar-a-Lago, where agents saw classified documents, also loomed large in Mr. Grassley's complaint. In that raid, roughly 30 armed agents entered the home of a former president of the United States with full authorization to use lethal force if needed to execute its warrant, and even search the former First Lady's clothing closet. This is over the archives, over administrative issues. And from a president who has declassification authority. Yet you have Joe Biden, who, yes, at the time is sitting president, but for 40 plus years as a senator and vice president, he removed literally thousands of documents, classified documents. Not having the constitutional authority or legal authority to declassify or to be in possession of those, or ever to remove them from the SNF or any kind of reason. And they were scattered all over the place. You're talking 1,800 documents versus what, 120? Now, you know the pictures that they showed you, that we all saw, of the boxes in a bathroom off the ballroom, and all of them, yes, I get that, the banker boxes. But remember, the FBI did two things here. Well, they did a lot of things. We'll get to what I'm talking about for a moment. Is they brought props. They brought props with them to display and to take pictures of props. These were the top secret folders, top secret. And then the pictures that they took, they implied that those boxes are all full of documents. They were filled with chat sheets, napkins and menus and all kinds of things that Trump had collected over his time as president, because that's what he does. He likes to do that. And out of all those boxes, there were only 120 classified documents versus 1,750 scattered between Joe Biden's locations. Just keep that in mind, folks. Yeah, we got to take our third and final break here on the Tuesday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show at AM 830 WCRN. 508-871-7000. You can still get into the conversation back in 2 to 10, folks. All right, folks, welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on the Tuesday afternoon edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Although we might give a lot of ideas. Give it a try, Jim. We'll let you know at 508-871-7000. All right, what say you? We've got Red State is talking about the Liz Cheney situation. She's threatened Donald Trump's DOJ with sanctions if they investigate her this just cracks me up that you have, the View and alleged journalists at some of these network channels and calling for pardons. They want Joe Biden to go pardon crazy on the way out the door. So naturally, if you suggest that people need a pardon, are you not then conceding that they did something illegal that they would need a pardon for? Common sense dictates that, does it not? What is it that you're asking for pardon? Now, over and over again, Donald Trump has said, when asked about, will you go after, what about this? And think about that for a moment. The question, when they present this to Donald Trump, the question they're presenting to him, are they not saying that what they did to you was not copacetic, was not legal, that they went after you for political reasons? Just think about it. Listen to the question, the way they ask him about, will you do to them what they did to you? That question acknowledges that that what they did to him was a banana republic move and was outside of the norms and doesn't fit in with the American way, much less the spirit of the Constitution and the freedoms and rights and guarantees that we have. And Donald Trump has repeatedly answered this by saying, no, my retribution, my payback, my answer to what they did to me is success. The way I'm going to respond to this is making America great again. Will be success with low-cost energy, by becoming an energy exporter, by the stock market doing well, by bringing jobs back to American soil, by getting other countries in line, by returning the petroleum dollar to the U.S. dollar. That's what makes our economy so powerful, folks. It's not us buying Chinese or crap made in Hong Kong or what have you. It's the petroleum dollar. It's trading oil globally in American dollar that has allowed us to have and finance endless wars around the globe. That's what makes us an economic powerhouse. And we've got to get back to that, because the first time since 1974 has oil been traded in other currency than the American dollar under the Biden administration. And Donald Trump knows, as with every other president, that the dollar must remain the petroleum dollar. So that's his answer when they ask him this. Even if you go back to 2016 and 2017 when he got sworn in as president, and he said that he was not going to go after Hillary Clinton or have the Justice Department go after Hillary Clinton, although they could have and should have. I argue should have. Because if you remember in the election, Comey came out and said, yes, she did have a server and she had classified documents and she totally violated all of the security acts and protocols. And that she absolutely defied preservation orders and subpoenas and smashed and destroyed blueberries and blackberries or devices. So when they ask these questions to Trump, they're acknowledging that they even understand that what was done to him was criminal, was a violation of the norms of law. And if you even look at the cases, we've talked about this over the show, the legal gymnastics that were done with the New York case, ignoring statute of limitations, trying to saddle things together. It was a Frankenstein of a monster type of case, which is why they're falling apart, which is why I've always maintained I don't want Joe Biden to pardon, much less Trump. And Trump knows, smart enough to want to pardon himself. Not that the president has ever done that. And that's still something that if Joe Biden does it to himself on the way out the door, is that not going to end up probably for the SCOTUS? The powers of the party are very vast and they're not very restricted in the Constitution by the founding fathers. And when something like that happens, that's when we tend to have it end up with this. So the question then becomes, what was done to Trump, can he do that and use and weaponize it? He's saying, I'm not going to weaponize it. I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is make things good. I'm going to make things like they were before the pandemic hit. It looks like our system might be back online. Ken, if you want to give a call back at 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. We'll try to get you in the last few minutes of the show here. But let me get back to Liz Cheney threatened Donald Trump's incoming Department of Justice on Monday yesterday, claiming that any move to investigate the now defunct January 6th committee would meet sanctionable conduct. That's a mistake. Without a response to Trump's recent meet the precedent review. You go to that Friday and Sunday. Denied allegations that she and her colleagues destroyed evidence while speaking to NBC News. Kristen Welker, the president-elect, said the following: Cheney did something that's inexcusable, along with Thompson and the people on the unselect committee of political thugs. And you know, creeps. The president-elect said, referring to Mississippi Rep. Bonnie Thompson, the committee's chairman. They deleted and destroyed all evidence. Now, let's remember the production of what was done on January 6th. And I say production because they literally brought in Hollywood producers to put this on. Then they didn't release. In all fairness, they didn't release all the video footage. Because a lot of that footage that was finally released, Johnson got in as speaker, he released more. Didn't really fit the narrative they were telling us about January 6th, right? Now, there were some people who were bad actors, were out of control, and they should be held responsible for damage they did. But what they were trying to tell us about what was going on that day, the footage of that day, and there's 40,000 hours of this ridiculous amount, didn't fit the narrative. So this interview, Trump on Meet the Press, it triggered Cheney. She lashed out, stating that Trump committed the worst breach of our Constitution by any president in the nation's history. Did he know? Because he was pretty clear in his speech about peacefully and patriotically protesting. He was pretty clear about calling for peaceful protests and not to get out of here. Here's the truth. Donald Trump attempted to overturn the 2020 presidential election and seize power. This is what Cheney said. He mobilized an angry mob and sent them to the United States Capitol, where they attacked police officers, invaded the building, and halted the official counting of electoral votes. Trump watched on television as police officers were brutally beaten in the Capitol, was assaulted, refusing for hours to tell them off to leave. She continues. This was the worst breach of our Constitution by any president in our nation's history. Donald Trump suggested that members of Congress who later investigated his illegal and unconstitutional action should be jailed is a continuation of his assault of the rule of law and the foundations of our republic. Wow. Now, reading this post-election makes it all the more pathetic. There still has never been any evidence that Donald Trump intended for anyone to physically attack the Capitol building. None whatsoever. It's also simply false that he refused to ask the mob to leave for hours. Trump did not try to seize power, and it has been proven that they requested National Guard troops to be presented, but that was rebuffed. Well, she admitted it on her daughter's own documentary footage that got released, right? How do we know that? Because the January 6th committee received testimony corroborating that claim. Now, of course, Cheney and her cohorts buried it, refusing to include it in the hearings or on the report. The testimony wasn't revealed until March of 2024. A month later, 3 National Guard officers came forward as whistleblowers to tell that story. As to Trump's claim of evidence being deleted and destroyed, that happened as well. We know it happened. Cheney should really get the facts kind of before she starts with this. When faced with that reality, Cheney threatened the incoming Trump administration. Again, Donald Trump knows his claim about the Select Committee are ridiculous and false and has been detailed extensively, including by Chairman Thompson. There is no conceivable, appropriate, factual, or constitutional basis for what Donald Trump has suggested. A Justice Department investigator of the work of Congressional Committee and any lawyer who attempts to pressure that course will quickly find themselves engaged in sensual conduct. That's her boast. Now, I'm not sure exactly how that worked. It seems that if Cheney is suggesting Congress could sanction the DOJ as a separation of power issue, I'm being a little skeptical on this, because that would never happen, especially given that the current Republican majority, however slim, or maybe the means the legal establishment will step in and do her bidding. I'm not sure. Well, we'll talk about this. But folks, this wraps up the Tuesday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. I'm Joe Mangiacotti. Thank you for joining me back tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock for the Wednesday edition. Frankie Boyer's coming up right after me. So stay tuned here on Radio Central, AM 830 WCRN. Joe out.